Hello, all, and welcome to Overtime. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nicholas Soutter, and let's get started, shall we? Wow. All right. Representing yet another. Oh, yeah, well, I'll ignore that for now. You guys have seen worse. Representing yet another lost opportunity and another failure on the part of the United States to contain the coronavirus. The new South African variant has now been found in the United States. The CDC has confirmed 2 cases in South Carolina of the B1351 variant, which is significantly more transmissible than the current COVID that we know and have been dealing with for the last year. However, it is important to note that while it is more transmissible, which is to say it is easier to go from person to person and it appears to transmit significantly faster, it does not appear to be any more dangerous. And by that I mean to individuals who catch it. It doesn't appear to have longer consequences, more severe consequences, higher higher death rates. We don't know for certain. It's still very new, but there is at least no evidence that it is more lethal. It is obviously still a big problem because if it transmits as quickly as it appears to, that means the current measures, which have already been not insignificant, I apologize, have been inadequate to deal with the problem. These measures will certainly be even less adequate in, porpoise, really? Okay, if I'm a solipsist, can I get her to stop the solipsist? I'm just saying. I'm just saying. She's me, right? Technically. So, that's good. At least I get credit for the clever jokes, but still. Um, oh, dear Lord. It's my fault, too, because I started that. So it means that, unfortunately, it is a bigger crisis for this country because it's harder to contain. And we have already failed to contain it. And one of the problems is the more it spreads, the faster the mutations occur. The goal of this was originally to try to contain it before it got so large that we ended up in the situation that we have now, which is it's mutating faster than we can deal with it. And that's going to be a very significant problem. And now this new mutation is even faster. Maya, really? Really? Jesus. Okay. Trying to do a serious news show. We're talking about a lot of people dying. Come for the journalism, stay for the solace. Dear Lord, I don't know what I did something in a past life. Ask enough people, I did something in this life too, I imagine. At any rate, so let's see. Obviously that's a staggering problem, and it is now in the U.S. in at least 2 cases because it spreads so quickly. And the fact that we already got 2 cases, I think it's unlikely we'll be able to arrest the spread. The other thing that's important to note about it is that so far the current vaccines appear to have a roughly 50% efficacy against it, as opposed to the 90% efficacy they have against the original COVID, meaning that our current defenses, which we're only now starting to employ, are not going to be as effective. So it's actually an extraordinary problem. People who have already had COVID, it turns out that the immunity that you get, your body develops antibodies to it, and you are immune from getting it again for a short period of time. It appears that period of time, with some illnesses, you could be inoculated almost for the rest of your life. With COVID, it appears you're inoculated really only for about 3 to 6 months tops. And it looks like that immunity may not help you particularly a lot with this new variant. So it's unfortunately, and it's one of 2 variants. It's the UK variant, which I kept calling the Brazilian variant because I think it showed up in Brazil, but it's the UK variant is unfortunately even worse. But that one we'll discuss at some other point if and when we need to. This variant has caused a shutdown and a quarantine of an entire hospital in Germany when 6 patients and staff ended up getting it. It's Obviously, a very big problem. President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador of Mexico has tested positive for COVID, making yet another world leader to come down with it. Only one leader, I think it was an African leader, has died of it. I've forgotten, unfortunately, his name and state. If Fox were here, should be happy to fill you in right after beating me about the ears for forgetting. He is currently reporting mild symptoms, so we of course wish him the best. In a stunning judgment, the U.S. Supreme Court has thrown out all the previous judgments against Trump for violations of the Emoluments Clause and rendered further prosecutions mute, saying that he couldn't be tried for such violations. Now, the Emoluments Clause is the clause in the Constitution that says you can't enrich yourself from your office. It goes without saying and is a rather important clause. Now, Trump has been absolutely enriching himself. He's been directing heads of state to his hotels in New York. He has refused to divest himself of his interests. You don't actually even need to divest. You don't need to sell off all your interests, but you need to have them managed by someone else so that you cannot utilize your position to make money. I thought the emoluments was probably one of the ones that was going to hook him in the end, but in this case, the Supreme Court has thrown it out. They appear to have argued that he was a sitting president at the time that they started this prosecution, so they threw out all of the previous ones. You cannot indict a sitting president for the most part, anything. That's what impeachment is for. However, they also seem to suggest that once he's out of office, he's not president, so emoluments no longer applies. This appears to completely invalidate the Emoluments Clause to the Constitution. I have no idea how that's reconciled. I think that's something that we're going to have to, as a country, do some soul searching, but nonetheless figure out what on earth this Supreme Court, which has rebuked him in the recent past, what on earth they were thinking. I don't know it, but it's really quite staggering. Trump has meanwhile said that he will not create a third party. He said this in a private discussion with the other heads of the Republican Party who were concerned that he would split the Republican Party if he started a third. He has said he will not, but he does expect something in return in what appears to be what appears to be a threat. He has said that any senator, any Republican senator who votes for the impeachment will find themselves facing primary challenges for their seat come the next election cycle. This has been seen as a threat, as I believe it was absolutely intended to be, especially given what we know about Trump. And whether or not he's going to create a third party or not is immaterial. Now, as you recall, he did create essentially what sounded like a third party, the Patriot Party. He said he would create a third party, the Patriot Party. He filed with the Federal Election Commission, but he filed it as a super PAC, not as a party, meaning it can do fundraising, he can snag as much money from it as he wants because it's a super PAC. That's all here and there, but for those of you who are sitting there going, wait, didn't he create one? No, he didn't. What he actually created was a super PAC. So he has said he will he would support strong primary challenges to any senator who votes to have him impeached. Meanwhile, Republican Representative Green has been indicted for comments she made 2 years ago supporting the execution of prominent Democratic politicians. It's being reported, although we haven't found a mainstream news source that has said this, that she's also essentially sort of the birther movement. She believes that numerous shootings, including ostensibly Sandy Hook, was fake, that there were actors, and that it was a false flag incident. We have not been able to confirm that, but what we do know is that she did, in fact, suggest that it would be okay to execute Democratic lawmakers, and that she has been very much in the the stealing the vote camp of the Trump party, which is a pretty extremist wing in the United States. Yesterday, Representative Jimmy Gomez announced that he is going to introduce a resolution to have her expelled from Congress. The Trump brand continues to take a hit in other ways. The value of Trump-branded buildings in Manhattan have lost over 50%. Now, this doesn't necessarily affect Trump directly. He, in some cases, it's just his brand. He often sells his brand. That was what he got most out of The Apprentice, was people all of a sudden, his name was famous. He was already famous, but his name was credible now. And so he could sell the Trump name to a building and so on and so forth. But many of these are condominiums. Some are apartments. But what ends up happening is it just takes a hit to the people who live there, but then they can't sell their properties and real estate dives, and nobody wants to do business with him again in the future. A lot of this doesn't affect him directly, but it does affect his ability to brand, which is right now ostensibly where he makes almost all of his money. So this is just one more sort of nail in his financial coffin. Rudy Giuliani is being sued by Dominion Voting Systems for $41.3 billion. Again, Rudy Giuliani is personally being sued for $41.3 billion in damages by the Dominion Voting Systems for false claims that he made, in which he suggested that the devices either were easily hacked, failed to operate properly, or that the company itself colluded in rigging the election for, I was going to say Bernie Sanders, for Biden. They're suing him. They get to sue for damages, and it's pretty extensive because this was a nationwide claim. Also, earlier this month, the chairman of the New York Senate Judiciary Committee formally requested that Rudy Giuliani be stripped of his license to practice law for inciting violence at the Capitol Hill protest, at least while it was still a protest. The commander of the D.C. National Guard has finally explained why it took him so long to reply to the calls for help when the Capitol building fell to what was by this point insurgents against the United States. He said that on January 4th, his rapid deployment authorization was revoked by the Pentagon. This forced him to get approval higher up the chain of command before he could deploy the troops. We do not know why the Pentagon revoked it a couple of days before this incident, but what we do know is that intelligence was very strong at that point, and stronger than we had been led to believe earlier, that something like this would happen and that there would be armed militia there and that they wouldn't be intending on causing violence. The FBI knew this. How much the Pentagon knew, we don't know, but there is no explanation as of yet as to why his rapid deployment authorization had been pulled. Oklahoma is trying to return its $2 million stockpile of hydroxychloroquine. Governor Stint was accused of making that purchase explicitly to insinuate himself and to get into the good graces of both the White House and the Republican Party, or the Republican leadership. He, at the time, that was May, he defended his order of the malaria drug by saying that, hey, you know what, even if it turns out it doesn't treat coronavirus, it's still useful for lots of other stuff, and, quote, that money will not have gone to waste in any respect. They can't use the drug. It's a toxic substance, and, we knew back then it didn't work for anything but malaria. It works for a few other things. It didn't work for COVID. So they are now trying to return it to the wholesaler from which they purchased it, and they're not having a whole heck of a lot of luck. Meanwhile, lawmakers in Canada unanimously voted to call on their government to declare the Proud Boys a terrorist organization. Former White House spokesman Kellyanne Conway is in some significant trouble. She is attempting to get a position at Fox News, but she has recently posted pictures of her 16-year-old daughter on Twitter. The pictures were of her topless. Her daughter went on to TikTok and said, quote, nobody would ever have any photo like that ever, so Kellyanne, you're going to jail. Yes, her daughter does call her by her first name. The relationship has been strained for quite some time. Sinister porpoise. It's not just malaria, it's anti-inflammatory. That helps with lupus, arthritis, and some autoimmune disease. And thank you very much for the correction. In fact, we did have on a person who suffered lupus and who had to take the drug for lupus. He had to get his eyes examined once a month for sudden blindness, which is one of the side effects. Another side effect of hydroxychloroquine, by the way, is a no pulse is a side effect. We actually read that on air. That is a side effect from the manufacturer. No pulse. Oh, dear Lord. Yes. Thank you. And I'll make that correction in a second, too. Thank you. No pulse is the side effect. What that is in layman's terms is dead, but they don't want to say sudden death as a side effect, so they list no pulse as a possible side effect to hydroxychloroquine. But the person we had on had was unable to get his regular dosage and had to combine doses in order to do it. And yes, I think sorry, I meant to say thank you. He was being sued for $1.3 billion. $1.3 billion. The 4 was supposed to be for, as in one of the downsides of voice dictation. So thank you for that correction too. So two important corrections. Moving forward, I don't know how much trouble she's in. I'd love to have that discussion. I think, posting your 16-year-old daughter topless on Twitter, wow. And I do see ways in which that could be an accident. But on the flip side, what I know of Kellyanne Conway, I'm not as convinced that it was an accident as I could be. And she and her daughter have a pretty toxic relationship towards each other. Nonetheless, Biden has ordered a moratorium on a number of deportations across the country. Texas has actually sued to stop the blocking of the moratoriums, so to overturn the moratorium. I think that's right. And has actually won. And right now, on the grounds that the anti-deportation policy is a violation of federal law, Biden is not permitted to put a moratorium on it, which means ICE should continue despite the instructions from the chief law enforcement officer of the country. So that's an interesting position to be in. Biden has also halted sales of arms to Saudi Arabia and UAE. This is not headlines across the country and probably should be. This is stunning. We have been selling arms to the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and other Middle Eastern countries for a very, very long time. What you see here is Donald Rumsfeld after a sale of weapons to Saddam Hussein. Most of the weapons that he had that were illegal, he got from us, and that includes the weapons of mass destruction. He actually did have weapons of mass destruction during our invasion, but the weapons were under UN seal. What we were looking for was non-declared weapons, but the weapons that he did have and that we knew about, he got from us, and he got them legally at the time. This includes chemical weapons and a variety of other things. When he gassed 10,000 of his own people, that was a weapon that we had given him. The Royal House of Saud is one of the most brutal dictatorships on the planet. It is reasonably close to North Korea. No, we don't talk about it the same way we talk about North Korea. There's a reason. There's a reason that 18 of the 19 hijackers were actually from Saudi Arabia. And if you ask people where were the hijackers from, the 9/11 hijackers, a lot of them will say Iraq. Because, well, hey, we attacked Iraq, so it must be Iraq. They're not from Iraq. They're not from Afghanistan. It's from Saudi Arabia. And in all of the documentation that came out at the time, what you will see is that where they were from was actually redacted in most of that information. Now, what our government said at the time was, well, we don't want people to blame Saudi Arabia for what a few people, bad apples, do. The biggest bad apple was a man by the name of Osama bin Laden, who was royalty in Saudi Arabia, and he was extraordinarily wealthy. His family was wealthy, but unlike the rest of his family, he thought that the Royal House of Saud shouldn't make money murdering other Saudis. And he thought that the people had to be independent of the Royal House of Saud. So he started a revolution against them in order to fight him, in order to fight their other enemies, and in order to brutally oppress their people. They needed weapons. We were happy to provide those weapons in exchange for favorable veto power, giving us the cheapest oil on the planet. We pay far less than just about any other country, and the entire boom of the 80s and 90s, which Clinton gets most of the credit for, and he deserves some. Bush actually deserves a lot of the credit because we got the favorable oil rates from arms deals, where we gave weapons to a known dictator, a known, really terrorist in his own country, so long as he would give us favorable oil prices, which he did for a very, very long time. Now, this is not new practice for the United States, but it has upset the Saudis so much that 18 of them were willing to fly their bodies in passenger planes loaded with innocent people and with fuel into buildings in New York. That's how pissed they are at us. And most people don't know it. Most Americans don't know it because we don't report on it because we can't. It would demonstrate that we violate our own values. We don't mind dictators. We love dictators as long as they do what we tell them. We just get pissed when dictators like Castro start cozying up to the USSR instead of the USA. But if they're cozying up to us, we have no problem with dictators who murder children, who rape women and children, who go around. The Royal House of Saud is unbelievably brutal, and we're perfectly fine with it. So many of their citizens hold us as the citizens who elected our leaders and who made these decisions. They hold us responsible, and they don't see any such thing as civilians because we live in a democracy, which means we are our government and we are responsible for those actions. That's their view. This would be the first time that anyone has honestly considered in the last 40 years or so not capitulating to the Royal House of Saud and giving them whatever they want. By the way, people often ask, what is the U.S. biggest export? It may come as a shock to some people. It's not freedom. Freedom is not our biggest export. Our biggest export is weapons. We are the number one weapons manufacturer and seller in the world. We sell more weapons to both sides of just about any conflict and we don't like to think of ourselves as, arms dealers and arms merchants, but that's what this country is. Hollywood movies actually is pretty high up there, believe it or not, but it doesn't beat guns. That's what we sell. That's what the U.S. is known for in the Middle East. We're not known for freedom. We're known for getting guns. And if you want to get guns, it's easier to get American guns than it is Soviet ones. Now, Soviet ones were actually built a little better, at least the original AK-47 compared to our M16, but we made it easier to buy them. That's the U.S., and Biden has, and by the way, Obama didn't, he started to reverse the policy, but he didn't do it in any earnest way. This is stunning news. And if Biden continues on this course, you can expect to see a pretty big hike in gasoline prices, but you can also see us starting to actually adhere to the values we say we do. It's an interesting change. At any rate, let's see. Moving on. Our main story actually isn't that one, although I wanted to take wow. Okay. I wanted to take a moment to expound on that a little bit because that's a story that got buried and I think is a very important one. What we're going to talk about today is stocks and the stock market and something very interesting that's been going on. Wall Street has been thrown into chaos over a short-selling strategy which has gone awry for a large number of firms. So we're going to do a very basic primer on what the stock market is and how it works. For those of you who sort of already know, I apologize, but let's just get into the basics. So most of you have a basic idea of how the stock market works. You buy a stock, you hold on to it until the value goes up, and then eventually you sell it and you presumably make money. That's the goal. That's how it works. Now, somebody said, well, gee, wait a minute. I can only make money if the stock goes up. What if I want to make money if the stock goes down? How do I do that? In comes what's called short selling. What you do is you sell a stock that you don't actually own yet. You sell a stock and say with a contract to deliver the stock in 1 week. You sell that stock. Let's say you sell one share of some stock for $100. You sell it, you get $100. But a week later, you have to provide that stock, and you don't have it yet. But a week later, when it's due, you go and check, and guess what? That stock tanked and is now you can buy it for $10. You buy it for $10, send it to the person you owe it to, and you have now made $90. That is called short selling. It is one of the ways you make money off of a stock going down as opposed to it going up. Now, there's some really sweet advantages to short selling if you do it right. One of them is, let's say Lehman Brothers, which was at one point selling at about $100 a share. Let's say you buy 10,000 shares of Lehman Brothers, but you short your purchase. So let me rephrase then. Actually, what you would do is you would sell 10,000 shares of Lehman Brothers stock at $100 a share. That's what I think that's $1 million if I did that right. So you sell it and you make $1 million. You now have $1 million in your pocket. However, you do owe 10,000 shares of Lehman Brothers. But if you did this right before the collapse of Lehman Brothers, what you would find, if you let's say 2 or 3 days later, Lehman Brothers collapses and the stock vanishes because the company liquidates. You don't owe that stock anymore. You don't owe it. You don't have to deliver your product. So you sold a product, you made $1 million on the sale, and you don't actually have to deliver it because the product doesn't exist anymore. That is short selling, and the dream of every short seller is to sell something short right before it tanks. A number of people, and we've covered a few of them on past shows here, saw the collapse in 2007, 2008 of the financial markets and sold short a lot of key stocks, knowing that these companies would eventually go under. They sold a lot of the mortgages short, and then they went long, actually. No, they went short on the insurance companies, too. They went long on the insurance swaps. Nonetheless, no, that's still not right. At any rate, they shorted the companies, the insurance companies that insured those companies, and were going to take massive hits. And as everybody else was getting wiped out, they made huge amounts of money because they saw this coming and they accurately predicted it. There's a great movie. It's called The Big Short. It's by Michael, what's his name? He also did Moneyball, a few other. It's a very good movie. At any rate, that's how short selling works. There is one downside to short selling. There's a number of downsides to short selling. One of them is you're on the hook for buying it, whatever the price is. If you sell 10,000 shares at $100, and then a week later, when you have to buy it, it's gone up to $150. You have to buy it. You can't sit there and say, "Ooh, I'd like to wait a little." No, you have to buy it. You've already made the commitment. So you have to buy it, and then you sell it. And the people who bought it actually now end up making money instead of you. Wall Street, in that respect, is a zero-sum game. Every bet you make, somebody else is betting you're wrong. And when somebody buys shorts, they think you're wrong. The other interesting thing is, if you bought the stock to Lehman Brothers right before the collapse, if you bought the stock to Lehman Brothers right before it collapsed, let's say you bought 10,000 shares at whatever price, and then it collapses, you get wiped out, but you only lose your investment. That's all you lose. You lose exactly what you put into it, not a penny more. Short selling doesn't work that way. Short selling has no actual upper limit as to how much you can lose. Let's say you short sell a stock at $1, and you think you sell 1,000 shares at $1. So $1,000. You get $1,000 off of this. Now, in a week, you're going to have to give. A week is just what I'm saying here. For at some point in the future, you're going to have to buy 1,000 shares. But what happens if it goes up to $2, $3, $8, $10, $15, $20, $60, $90, $100, $200? you still have to buy it. You must buy it. You've already sold it. So you have to buy it, no matter how high the price goes. So in theory, there's actually no upper limit to the amount of losses you could take. Unlike a regular sale, again, you could lose your entire investment, but that's it. With a short sale, there's no cap. So what happened? Well, this is roughly what has happened in the last, especially in the last 48 hours, as short sellers descended on a number of stocks, including AMC Theaters, Bed Bath & Beyond, and GameStop. Now, these are all brick-and-mortar stores that are doing reasonably poorly right now, and they are starting to look like they're going to go under. So they were short-sold by people who said, hey, the value is going to go down, so why don't I sell some stocks today? I'll buy the stocks in a couple of days to pay that off, and I will make up the difference in the money. Here's what happened. A number of day traders who have a Reddit page. Ooh, and I think I've let's see, what was the Reddit page? Actually, it was a subreddit, and I'll catch it. I think I've lost track of where that was, but they started short selling in early January. But on Friday, January 22nd, GameStop made a huge increase in value. Why is this? A number of day traders figured out that this was going on and figured out that it was being shorted. They also figured out that there were 71.2 million shorted shares of GameStop. I'm sorry. It was, I think I reversed that. I think it was 89.7 million shares of GameStop, but only, 71.2 million shares of GameStop, but 89.7 million were shorted. That means more were shorted than actually exist. Now, that's fine. That can happen because they're not due at a specific time. So as long as they're not all due on the same day, which would obviously make it impossible, and shenanigans. Actually, that's not even true because you could, at any rate, it's not as big a deal as it sounds that there were more shorted than exist because it's over time. It's not an issue. But it is an issue in this sense, which is it's over leveraging. It means that there are so many people that need that stock now. There's actually more people who are going to need the stock in the future than there are stocks available, at least in the immediate future. So they decided to, according to them at least, teach Wall Street a lesson, especially short sellers, which are universally pretty much despised on Wall Street, only slightly less so than day traders, but nonetheless. So they decided to actively start buying as much as they could, thereby driving the price up. Here's what happens. As the price starts to go up, now imagine you are a short seller and you're on the hook for 1,000 shares and you're watching the price go up. Every bit that price goes up is money you're losing, and if it doesn't turn around, you're going to get wiped out. Do you hang in there and watch it just go up and up and up? Or do you say, hey, this is an artificial inflation, it'll come back down, I'm going to wait? Well, some start to pull their money out, some don't. But if you start to pull your money out, what do you think that does to the price? Drives the price up even more. Why? Because you now want shares. You're saying, hey, I'm going to buy shares right now so I can pay off the people I already sold it to. The second you start trying to buy shares, you're now in the market. Demand has gone up, price goes up. And since there was so much demand already, even more than there was shares of stock, this created a vicious cycle where the stock would go up because people were demanding it. But people started demanding it because they had to buy it before the price would go up any higher. This would drive the price up even more. In the first day that this happened, which was last Friday, the price went up, I think it was 97%. No, it was 97%. Went up 97%. So quickly that it triggered an automatic halt to trading. On Monday, there were 7 more such halts to stop the stock from getting too wildly out of control. And by the time it was all done, the stock had gone up over 1,000%. GameStop stock went up over 1,000%, and the margin for those who have been short selling on it is estimated at $70.87 billion. There hasn't been any added. The company hasn't done anything revolutionary. They're not suddenly selling digital online. They haven't changed anything. This is a bunch of Wall Street investors who said, we're going to make some money shorting this stock. And a lot of companies don't like having their stocks shorted because it does actually undermine the company. That neither here nor there, long process. It's not good for the company if you're getting shorted too often. So a bunch of Wall Street investors said, we're going to short it. A bunch of day traders said, hey, look, they're shorting that, and they've shorted enough of it that we could start what's called a short squeeze. We could, because we know there will be a demand soon. There has to be a demand because they have to fill these orders. If we drive it up, it's like a firestorm. We can create its own weather pattern, and we can force it to just keep going up and 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 up. So then you have this meteoric rise of it's GameStop, a brick and mortar, you see them at the mall, and they've gone up over 1,000% in the last couple of days. So that's, I think, the first half of this story. And I think it's probably the most important part so far. So what you have now is a number of brokerage firms that had shorted this stock that are now on the verge of bankruptcy because, again, there's no upper limit to how much you can lose on a short. There's no upper limit. As long as the stock keeps going up, you're going to keep losing. At least on a regular sale, there's a bottom limit. The stock hits zero. You can't lose more than that. But it ain't true on a short sale. So this has been really staggering for the people on Wall Street. A lot of people who really have contempt for day traders have been surprised that they had the savvy to spot this and figure out how to do it and get it done in the rapid turnaround time that it would take and be able to leverage this. Nonetheless, they find themselves overpositioned, and I think there's going to be a lot of consequences for a lot of people on Wall Street, and they're going to have to decide whether or not they want to continue to allow this. One of the problems with the stock market has a lot of things it does well, and I think the stock market's actually genuinely important for a number of reasons. But it isn't that different from organized gambling. And you can be very clever about it, and you can try to outmaneuver other people, but it's a battlefield. It's an economic battlefield. And the original idea behind the stock market was you invest in a company. A company needs a little money. You get them, they sell shares. You invest your money. If they do well, you get more of your money back, and it's good for everybody. And it's turned into this thing where everybody's battling over it. And GameStop, which again hasn't produced anything new of value in the last week, but has seen their stock go up 1,000%. So, but to make things just a little more interesting, and I want to get the if I recall, the name of the software that they were using to was called I think it's Robinhood. Is that correct? I think it's Robinhood. It's the software, it's the company that was allowing the day traders to do this. Now, one of the reasons this works, first of all, there are more day traders now than at pretty much any time in history. Why? COVID. Everyone's at home, they're bored, and they want to make a little money, and they figure, hey, day trading maybe is the easy way to do it. Day trading has been very difficult for people to make money on, especially amateurs, because fees. The trading companies charge fees for every single trade. You have to make more in that trade, and the sum of everything that you lose, you have to try to find a way to make it a net positive. That's not easy to do if it's just day to day and you're going in and you're not, if this is a hobby. What revolutionized that was recently a change in the fee structures, where there are a number of companies that are not charging any fees whatsoever. Unlimited trades, no fees. Why? They are actually subsidized by larger brokerages. And what these brokerages do is they are interested in seeing the total amount of trades go up. They're interested in seeing more trading going on because they can leverage that. Somebody has to be on the other side of those trades, and they can just catch the fees on the other side of them. So the more business there is on Wall Street, the better they do. And so in the same way that eventually we started scraping the bottom of the barrel with subprimes, and we said, hey, you know what? It doesn't matter if you can't even afford to pay back the loan. We just want the loan. What they've been saying now is it doesn't matter if you can't afford to make the day trades. We just want people trading. So companies like Robinhood are for free doing trades, but they get subsidized by firms in the back. And here's why that's important. Robinhood suspended all trades of GameStop. And actually, that's not true. I'm sorry. They suspended buying. They did not suspend selling, but they did suspend buying of GameStop. Now, they argued that they were doing this in order to protect their customers from wild variations in the market. But A, that's really not their job. And in fact, they're barred from doing that kind of thing. That's a load of bullshit. So why stop the trades? Why stop the trades? At least the buying, not the selling, but the buying. Why? Well, as I said, they get their money not from their clients, because their clients aren't paying a dime. They're getting their money from subsidies from larger brokerage houses. These are the houses that have just gotten hit by the day traders, and these are the houses that have lost $70.87 billion to GameStop alone, to shorting GameStop. So these guys, we don't know why they stopped the trading, but there appears to be a conflict of interest, because if any of the people that subsidize Robinhood are any of the large brokerage firms that is now taking a bath with the increasing prices, who want to see all the buying stop. They have to see the buying stop because they're getting wiped out. It'd be interesting to see who's actually footing the bill. Now, there is now a class action lawsuit that is being proposed against Robinhood because they cannot arbitrarily suspend the accounts of people, especially when they have assets in them. If you have $1,000 in your account there and they're saying, hey, you can buy any stock you want except GameStop, we're not going to let you buy GameStop. Well, they have to have a legitimate reason for doing that, and I can't think of one. So it looks like now we're going to see some illegal force being exerted. That's it's speculation, but I have a very hard time seeing it being anything else. So that's an interesting story. It's been a wild ride. I think it used to be that insider trading was almost always illegal. It used to be nobody really took it that seriously, and then they realized, look, if you don't stop it and stop it cold, the stock market won't work. The stock market has to work on this assumption that it's fair and that the other side is operating with roughly the same information you're operating with. If there isn't that trust in the system, the stock market collapses. You cannot have a stock market where insider trading is at least perceived to be allowed. You could actually allow it as much as you like. It's the perception that's more important than the reality. But for now, let's assume they're the same thing and say you couldn't allow it. I think ultimately these kinds of shenanigans couldn't be allowed either, because they do a lot of damage to ancillary companies. But this is the same problem with leveraging. Lehman Brothers went under because they over-leveraged. And I think the original amount you were allowed to leverage was 1-32, which was already staggering amount of money you could leverage. And they just took that off and said you can leverage as much as you like. And these banks way over-leveraged and then went under. So we now have the Dodd-Frank was, among other things, supposed to stop how much you could leverage. It may also have to have limits on short selling and limits on this kind of thing, where what these guys did was they saw how by applying pressure in one small area, they could have a huge effect on the other side of the market. And again, now what's affecting the market is other market forces or other actors in the market, not the natural market forces. It's not the value of the company. The value of the company hasn't changed in the slightest. Just a group of people who said, we're going to apply a little pressure here and put, whoa, hey, oh, have fun with that. On a side note, one of them took to Twitter and said something along the lines of, we bailed you guys out on 2007, 2008. Payback's a bitch is essentially what I'm paraphrasing. He didn't quite say that. I forget exactly what he said, but we bailed them out, and now they're getting their just rewards. At any rate, I think that just about covers it. So I'm going to quickly check the live chat and see what's going on. Yeah, it has been. It's interesting. Well, day traders are loathed on the stock market, and I think they're loathed because they really do have a negative impact. In part, it's legit. They have a negative impact, and it's a problem. But I think they're also loathed because there are some day traders who seem to be really successful. And that really is counter to what the mythos is on the stock market. So if a day trader can come in and do these things that these guys, spend years learning to do, and they're these experts, they crashed Wall Street. Now you got these day traders coming in, making loads of money. I think there's a little jealousy there too. And doesn't like, at any rate, day traders are absolutely loathed. And the day traders know it. And one of the things that some of the discussions that they actually had on this subreddit was how to let the regular professional traders know that, hey, guess what? We're not quite as stupid as you think we are. So this was seen by a number of people. It's hard to tell how much of this is post hoc. Clearly, some of this they knew what they were doing. There's ways to make money on Wall Street. I'm not going to sit there and say that they. The money, I think, was probably the biggest influence. They're like, hey, wow, we can make a lot of money if we do this. And they have. But that they can do it kicking in the teeth of the professionals, I think was a added bonus and helped them to get greater numbers of people involved in this. Putting, if you have all hands on deck and say, okay, everyone drop in, $5-10 and, hey, you'll get a little money off of this. If you wouldn't normally trade, why don't you trade today? Let's see what we can do. And they just push this thing, and it's been amazing to watch. And I don't know what the consequences are going to be for Wall Street. It may be that they're none observable in the near future, but if this doesn't result in some legislation in the same way that insider trading would, and by the way, insider trading, I'm not sure is necessarily, by the way, immoral in any strict sense. It's just immoral. It's just that in a market, what you end up trading is information. If you want to trade stocks, you have to make sure that everybody's on a level playing field. If you want to trade information, okay, fine, you trade stocks, but you allow for insider trading. Then it's all about who's got the information. The stocks are actually completely irrelevant at that point. The stocks are completely irrelevant. What you're paying for is somebody's knowledge, and they say, well, I've got a tip, X, Y, and Z, and if you're lucky, it's a good tip, and if you trust your insider source, then fine. But they don't want the stock market to be trading information. They want it to be trading stocks. So insider trading has to be blocked. I think that's probably a wise choice. But again, it's not that there's anything inherently moral about having a system that would allow it. But then you'd have to be open about the fact that you're allowing it, and that would just dramatically change the dynamic. You'd still have a stock market. It would still work. But it would be very different. So, yeah, so I think that's sort of where we are. And yes, Vodka Not, we actually covered that. We spent a good deal of time on that. He suspended weapons sales to the Saudis, and we covered just how pleased they are with us. 18 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. There's a reason, and the gun sales is actually the largest part of it. We like to say they hate us for our freedom, and there's sort of a little truth to that, but just enough that you can plausibly say it, and people aren't thinking. The biggest reason, the Saudi government really doesn't like us. They say they like us, but they don't like us, but they pretend to, and they don't hate us particularly either. So They just think we're hypocrites, and they're probably right, especially from their point of view. But the people of Saudi Arabia despise us, and that's because every time somebody from the royal house of Saud shoots a bullet through the chest of a 3-year-old girl, they say, gee, the Americans gave them that weapon, and if it wasn't for the Americans, we could overthrow our own government, which they've been trying to do for a very long time. I predicted the royal house of Saud was going to go down within 10 years, and my scope on that ended probably 2 years ago. Royal House of Saud is still, but one of the reasons we invaded, if you want to understand why we invaded Iraq, people say oil, yeah, but what about the oil? It wasn't just getting their oil from them. It really wasn't. It was about veto power on OPEC. We currently have veto power on OPEC through one source, Saudi Arabia. And they don't veto it every single time there's a price hike, because that would be a little too obvious, but everybody knows. And they veto price hikes on the U.S. They'll price hike the EU. They'll price hike everybody except us, giving us the cheapest oil basically on the planet, except for Saudi Arabia. Actually, I think because they tax it, we have basically the cheapest oil on the planet, and the entire economic boom of the 90s came from our weapons sales to Saudi Arabia. But we were also very well aware that the Royal House of Saud can't last forever. There's constant assassination. And again, the only reason they're still around is because they have weapons, and they get them from us. Nobody else will sell them to them. We're the biggest arm dealers on the fucking planet. And we'll sell basically to anybody until you piss us off somehow. We were selling to Saddam Hussein, Donald Rumsfeld. So we'll sell to anybody until all of a sudden our image, then we'll change our minds and we'll kill you. But short of that. So, and he was an ally. Keep in mind, he was an ally for a very long time, but so was Osama bin Laden. He was our ally against the Russians in Afghanistan. Want to know where Osama bin Laden got his weapons from? So, at any rate, we knew that the Royal House of Saud would go under at some point. Iraq gave us an opportunity to get a second veto power on OPEC. Problem is, we thoroughly screwed that up, and now they want nothing to do with us. So they're not going to voice veto power. If they're even, I think they're back on OPEC. Yeah, I think they are. I forgot when they got back on OPEC. But they're not going to exercise veto power for us. So we're back stuck with Saudi Arabia. So every president has had this thing to deal with. We have current treaties that we have signed saying we're going to give them guns and they're going to give us lots of money. They're also going to just sort of under the table, it's agreed and understood that they're going to make sure that the oil prices are really, really cheap. You can sit there and spit in their faces. And by the way, I was really pissed. When Trump destroyed the deal with Iran. You can't fucking just tear up our treaties and treaties that were made by the last president because nobody's going to make a treaty with us again. I believe that. And I believe he did massive damage to us, and I think that treaty would have worked. But we have treaties with the Royal House of Saud, which bin Laden, not bin Laden, wow. Oh, I didn't just say that. Which Biden is now saying he's going to tear up. And I do agree with him doing that. So I have to say, speaking of hypocrisy, I do have reasons, but we have a treaty with them. We provide them weapons. We provide them jet fighters. We provide them everything. And with it, they are far worse than Saddam Hussein was to their own people. So, and I do think if Biden pulls us out and says we're no longer doing this, if oil prices skyrocket, we start paying much closer to what other countries in the world pay, if our economy slows down and if we're no longer living this golden age that we had in the 80s and 90s, we are still really lucky that between that and 9/11, that's the only price we've paid for that arms deal. Because that was one of the evils of this country. And it goes up there with slavery It goes up there with torture. It goes up there with Tuskegee. It goes up there with a lot of shit. So we'll be lucky if the consequences are just the most obvious ones, and of course 9/11. At any rate, yeah. Well, and switching to electric, and you know what? If that's Biden's plan, I think that's a good switching to electric cars. Yep. So, but again, that's why you need someone in the office who's a forward thinker. That's how you get out of this. And we made a deal. We made a very bad deal. It was very selfish. They've abused it, not on us. They've done right by us. But we claim we have these values. And, you know, when you take a look at the rest of the world and you say, wow, they really hate Americans, there's a lot of reasons. This kind of hypocrisy is one of them, because most people in the world are a lot more news literate than we are, and they know this shit is going on. They know. We may not. Then again, we also may not, because our government doesn't broadcast this. Well, the French are sitting there going like, oh, there go the Americans. They're selling weapons to baby killers again. You know, but the rest of the world knows. And so when you wonder why other countries are as pissed at us as they are, this is just one of the many reasons why. So at any rate, yeah, there's a lot. So we at some point, and we actually did a show. We did a show on the history of Iran and Iraq, which we did. We had on a historian, Dr. Misha Griffith, was on and explained that history, and I think it was very helpful for people who wanted to understand how and why, because that's a very long history there, and it's an important one. But the Middle East has a much greater history than we tend to give it credit for, and that history is not unimportant. So, yeah, stop letting the CIA monkey around with other countries. That's... What? Oh, come on. Overthrowing friendly dictatorships and installing evil ones is really what we do. That's not entirely... We overthrew a semi-hostile one in Iran, put in a friendly one that got overthrown for a really bad one. Where you know, but listen... I think that's proof. I think we need to keep doing that kind of thing, because we fucked it up so many times. Statistically speaking, we're going to get the next one right. I'm just saying. All right. So, yeah, I'm going to go in to, I'll be in on the Discord in a little bit. So it's actually at about an hour. So we holy smoke. We started on time. We're going to wrap this up just at about the right thing. So I don't see any other major questions. I don't think I missed any super chats. If I did, someone better let me know in the next 60 seconds. No, I think we're, oh my God, I think we're good. All right. So, that's it. Thank you all for coming. We have a number of shows coming up. Our schedule is going to be on the Discord, and, you know, you can always see what new shows are coming up. But we got Dr. Richard Carrier is joining us for the Bayesian method. We are still trying to work out with getting Aaron Ra back for politics, atheism and politics. And Christopher Mowdy is going to be on to discuss human memory. It's befitting that that's the one that I forgot. So on behalf of everyone on In Time, thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our mods who have been doing a spectacular job and who've just been helping out, and also actually really do contribute to this news breakdown by making a lot of it available on our Discord, which I hope you'll join us there. I'll be in a few minutes to chat with people, and, you know, you can find lots of news and other awesome discussion topics that you can engage in, or just shoot the shit and talk about solipsism, because Porpoise hangs out there. So, night all, thank you all very much, and we will catch up with you soon.